The chamber was old, older than most of the species sitting in it. The walls were made of a dark stone that no one had quarried in 300 years. The seats curved in a wide half circle, each one shaped for a different body, one low and flat for the Thalari, who had no spines worth mentioning, one deep and wide for the Gorvan delegates, who were large enough to knock over a human without noticing. The lights were dim. They were always dim. Someone, 3 centuries ago, had decided dim lighting made difficult decisions easier to reach. Today, 11 seats were filled. 10 of the delegates had already signed. The paper, real paper, a council tradition, sat in the center of the table. It had a name, the Accord of Dissolution. It meant the Galactic Council was giving up. It meant 31 inhabited worlds, 400 years of shared law, and roughly 9 billion people across 12 species were going to become the property of the Volkai Dominion. The ink was still wet on 10 signatures. The human seat had been empty for the first hour of the session. Then it was not. Ambassador Lena Verk walked in 7 minutes late. She was 43 years old. She had short gray-streaked hair and a paper cup of coffee that she had clearly made herself from a machine in the hallway. She sat down, looked at the paper in the center of the table, and took a sip. Council Speaker Ashvel, who was Thalari and had 4 eyes and the patience of something that had lived a very long time, watched her. Ambassador Verk, Ashvel said. Her voice came through a translation collar. It sounded like wind through reeds. The session began 1 hour ago. I know, Verk said. I read the summary on the way in. Then you understand what has been decided. Verk looked at the paper again. Then she looked at the Volkai delegation, who sat at the far end of the half-circle in seats they had not been invited to bring but had brought anyway. They were tall. They were gray-skinned and still, and they wore no decorations of any kind because the Volkai did not believe in decorations. They believed in outcomes. Their lead delegate was called Fleet Commander Vethar. He had not spoken once during the session. He did not need to. The paper spoke for him. I understand what has been signed, Verk said. I haven't signed it. The room was quiet the way rooms get quiet when something unexpected happens, and everyone is deciding whether to acknowledge it. Ashvel said carefully, Ambassador, the terms are generous. 3 billion human lives preserved. Full cultural retention. A client status that. Client, Verk said, just the word, she let it sit. It is the best outcome available, Ashvel said. The Volkai Dominion controls 70% of jump-capable space. Their fleet. I know their fleet numbers, Verk said. We ran the models. I've seen the same math everyone else in this room has seen. She put her coffee down. I'm not disputing the math. Vethar spoke for the first time. His voice was flat and precise, and did not carry emotion the way human voices did, because the Volkai had decided, at some point in their history, that emotion in leadership was a structural flaw. Then you understand, he said, that refusal is not a strategy, it is a sentiment. Verk looked at him. She had a way of looking at people that was not hostile and was not warm. It was the look of someone who had decided to take a person seriously enough to argue with them. Fleet Commander, she said, how many wars has the Dominion fought? A pause, 37. And how many of those enemies fought you knowing they were going to lose? Another pause, longer. None, he said. They all believed they had a chance. Right, Verk said. So you've never actually fought an enemy who looked at your numbers, agreed they were correct, and fought you anyway. She picked her coffee back up. That's a gap in your data. The room was very quiet. The human vote, Verk said, is no. She stood up. She did not take the paper. She did not make a speech. She walked back out the way she came, and the door closed behind her, and for a long moment no one in the chamber said anything at all. Ashvel looked at the door, then she looked at Vethar. Vethar was very still. He was looking at the space where Verk had been sitting, at the paper cup she had left behind. There was still coffee in it. She is posturing, said the delegate to his left, a younger officer named Sekveth. They will recalculate. They will see there is no path. Yes, Vethar said. He did not say it with confidence. He said it the way someone says something because they need it to be true. Within 48 hours, the human response came. Not from the government, not from the military. It came from the cities. Manufacturing plants that had been making transport parts began making ship hulls. Universities that had been doing material science research began doing weapons research. A farming cooperative on the coast of what humans called Portugal posted a message that said simply, "We're in." It got shared across every human network in 11 hours. The Volkai Intelligence Division sent a report to Vethar's ship. It said human civilian morale undeteriorated. Economic conversion rate 340% faster than projected. Psychological modeling insufficient data. Recommendation reassess. Vethar read it twice. Then he looked out the viewport at the stars between his fleet and Earth. He had never needed to reassess before. He did not enjoy the feeling. The Kala Drift was a dead stretch of space between two systems that nobody had ever wanted badly enough to name properly. Commander Rael, Das wanted it badly enough now. He stood at the front of the bridge of the Ardent, a patrol-class ship that was 12 years old and had a coffee stain on the left armrest of the command chair that no one had ever cleaned because, at some point, it had become a good luck charm. He had a battered paperback wedged in his jacket pocket. The spine said a history of naval tactics, Vol. II. It had been his grandfather's. The pages were yellow. The Volkai had 9 ships, he had 1. "Sir," said his navigator, a young woman named Cho, "the tactical AI is recommending retreat to the Belen corridor and—" "I know what it's recommending," Rael said. "It's also saying that our probability of mission success at current position is 11%. Cho was quiet for a moment. "Yes, sir." Rael pulled the book out of his pocket. He opened it to a page he had dog-eared a long time ago. He read one paragraph, then he put it back. "Cut the engines," he said. Cho stared at him. "Sir." "Cut them, all of them, right now." The Ardent went dark. No thrust, no active sensors, no heat signature worth reading. They drifted. In the silence of the bridge, Rael could hear his own breathing. The 9 Volkai ships swept past them. They were looking for a ship that was running. A ship that was sitting perfectly still and cold in the middle of open space was not, apparently, something their search patterns were designed to find. Their sweeps were built for fleeing targets. It was a reasonable design. Every enemy they had ever faced had tried to flee. The Volkai formation passed. Then it split, 3 ships pushing ahead toward the relay station, 6 circling back to verify the kill. Rael waited until the 3 forward ships were committed. "Engines," he said quietly. "Full burn. Target the 3 forward ships before the 6 can regroup." The Ardent exploded back to life. Cho was already moving before the order finished. The ship hit the 3 forward Volkai vessels from behind, close, inside the range where their biggest guns couldn't depress far enough to target. 2 of the 3 Volkai ships were disabled in under 4 minutes. The 6 behind them turned and burned hard. Rael hit the relay station with his last 2 missiles, not to destroy it, but to blow the power coupling, which knocked out the Volkai's local communications for 17 minutes. Then he ran. He got out with 1 engine and a hole in the rear hull the size of a ground vehicle. The relay station was saved. HFY, who had been watching from an observation shuttle 3,000 kilometers away as a diplomatic witness, had not moved from her seat the entire time. She had 4 eyes and she had used all of them. Her translation collar was off. Whatever she was thinking it in Thalari, in words she did not have a human equivalent for. She turned on her collar and said to her assistant, "Send a dispatch to the council. Tell them," she stopped. "Tell them I will send the dispatch later. I need to find the right words." She did not find them for 2 days. Meanwhile, the Vorkai War Council met on their command vessel. Sekveth presented the Kala drift engagement as a data point. Anomalous, he said. The human commander used a tactic that has no precedent in our engagement library. Shutting down all systems to avoid detection in open space, and then attacking from within minimum gun range. He paused. It should not have worked. And yet, said the general across the table. And yet, Sekveth agreed. Our assessment is that it was desperation, a one-time improvisation born of hopeless odds. No one in the room disagreed. This was the most comfortable explanation. It was also wrong about 4 times in the next 6 weeks. The Vorkai launched a psychological campaign alongside their military one. They began broadcasting to every human comm channel. Casualty numbers, destroyed ships, projected dates for Earth's fall. Clean, factual, designed to break civilian morale the way it had broken 20 other civilizations. The broadcasts were received. The humans replied to them. They replied with images, short video clips, jokes that the Vorkai translation systems rendered as pure nonsense, music that had no military function whatsoever, and messages that said things like "try harder" and "is that all you've got," and memorably, a single image of a small human in very old clothes raising one finger in a gesture that Sekveth had to have explained to him 3 times before he understood, and still did not fully understand. "They are not afraid," Sekveth said. "They are afraid," said Vethar, who had been reading the intelligence reports very carefully. "They are afraid and they are doing it anyway. That is not the same thing." No one had an answer for that. On a border station near the edge of occupied space, a Vorkai soldier named HFY was separated from his unit during a corridor fight. He was shot in the side. He hid in a medical bay. A human medic found him. She was small and tired, and her hands were already red from hours of work. She looked at him, he looked at her. He had a weapon, she did not. She put down what she was carrying, picked up a kit, and started treating his wound. He did not know what to do. His training had no protocol for this. He let her. Later, when his unit found him and took him back, he filed a report. It said, "Received medical treatment from a human medical officer. No exchange of information. No coercion." Treatment appeared to be he stopped writing. He looked at the blank space. Then he wrote the only word he had, "voluntary." Command received the report. They noted it. Then they filed it under cultural anomaly and did not discuss it further. HFY thought about the medic for a long time after that. He could not explain why. The station at Myra's Edge held for 11 days before Rail gave the order to pull back. He made the call at 300 ship time, standing over a map table with 3 of his officers, all of them tired in the way that lives behind the eyes and doesn't go away with sleep. The colony had 14,000 people. The Vorkai had committed 6 warships to taking it. Rail had 2 ships with damage already, no reinforcements coming for at least 9 days, and a corridor that was going to close in 40 hours. He looked at the map for a long time. Then he said, "We go, now, get the civilian transports out first." They got 11,000 of the 14,000 out. He did not talk about the other 3,000. Not on the bridge, not in his log, not to anyone. He put their names in a personal file he kept on a drive he did not connect to the ship's network. He added to it after every engagement. It was getting long. The war had entered its middle part, the grinding, quiet, daily kind of hard that doesn't make good stories because it's not made of single moments. It's made of weeks. The Vorkai controlled the outer colonies and were pushing slowly, steadily, the way water gets into rock. Not fast, patient. Humanity was holding, not winning, holding. Verk was called back to the council for a formal review. 3 council species had filed complaints, the Yari, the Gorvan, and the Peli, all claiming that human military actions near the neutral buffer zones were causing damage to trade routes, to relay infrastructure, to 2 Gorvan observation posts that were technically civilian. She sat in the same chamber, the same dim lights, the same curved seats. She answered every question for 4 hours. She gave exact numbers. She gave the tactical reasoning behind every decision that had come close to the neutral zones. She acknowledged the damage to the Gorven post specifically, and said that the commanding officer on that engagement had already been reviewed. At the end, Speaker HFY, who had just returned from the human fleet and had not fully settled back into her council role, said, "Is there anything you want to say to the affected delegations, Ambassador?" Verk looked at the Gorven delegate, then the Yari, then the Pelling. "We are fighting a war," she said. "We are trying to fight it correctly. We will not always succeed, but we will always try." She paused. "That's what I can offer." She did not say sorry. The room understood the difference. HFY wrote in her private log that night. She did not apologize because an apology would have been easier than what she said. What she said was harder. It was a promise. The Thaleri did not make promises lightly. HFY understood for the first time that humans might not either. Vethar was housed in a set of rooms on a human diplomatic station near the council, not a cell. Rooms with a window that looked out at docked ships, with a desk, with a data terminal that had been unlocked to give him access to human historical archives. Verk's order. No one else had approved it. He started reading because he had nothing else to do. He read about something called the Second World War. He read about cities that were bombed flat and rebuilt. He read about soldiers who came home broken in ways no one could see and still went to work, raised children, lived ordinary lives beside the damage. He read about a city called Leningrad that was surrounded and starved for 900 days and did not give up. 900 days. He sat with that number for a long time. He read about the war crimes tribunals, about a species that had invented industrial killing and then invented the legal system to prosecute it, prosecuted its own people in public by its own rules. He did not have a Volkai word for that. He had a concept for punishment. He had a concept for order. But the specific human act of saying we did something wrong and we will stand in our own court and answer for it, that had no Volkai equivalent. He wrote a note to Verk. It said, "I have a question about the Nuremberg trials." She replied within an hour. It said, "Come to the cafeteria. I have 40 minutes." They sat across from each other at a plain table. She had coffee. He had a glass of water. He asked his question. She answered it. Then he asked another. She answered that one too. On the Myra's Edge transport ship, a soldier named Private Marisol Yen was court-martialed. The charge was failure to follow a direct order during the withdrawal. The order had been to fire on a docking corridor to prevent the Volkai from using it as an entry point. Yen had refused the order. The corridor had housed, at the time, 4,000 civilians who had not yet been loaded onto transports. The commanding officer had run the numbers and determined that sealing the corridor was the correct military choice. Yen had looked at the numbers, then she had looked at the corridor. She had lowered her weapon. The corridor was taken. The Volkai used it. It cost the withdrawal 2 hours in one of the 2 ships. 11,000 still got out instead of 14. Her court-martial found her guilty. She was reduced in rank and reassigned. Somewhere in a file that was classified and would not be opened for 20 years, an unsigned commendation was recorded. It cited no engagement. It gave no details. It said only, for maintaining her humanity under conditions designed to remove it. No one knew who wrote it. Rael knew who wrote it. He added Yen's name to a second file, one he had only recently started keeping, separate from the names of the dead. This one was for the living, for the ones who had done the hard thing in the hard moment and come out still recognizably themselves. It was shorter than the other file. He was adding to it more slowly than he wanted, but he was adding to it. Outside his viewport, the stars held still the way they always did, not cruel, not kind. Just there. The war moved through them like something invisible, leaving its marks on ships and people and records and the private files of commanders who couldn't sleep. Somewhere further out, the Vokai were recalculating. Again, still. They had never needed to recalculate this many times before. Vethar sent the message to Vokai High Command on a morning when the station was quiet. He had been drafting it for 6 days. He had deleted it 4 times. The final version was 11 words long. It said, "What would you accept if it was not their surrender?" He sent it. Then he sat at his desk and looked out the window at the docked ships and waited. He did not know what he was waiting for. He was not certain High Command would answer. He was not certain, if they did, that the answer would be the one he was starting to hope for. He was changing. He could feel it the way you feel a bone that has been set after being broken. Not pain exactly, but an awareness of something that used to be one way and was now another. He had read too much. 3,000 kilometers away, on the bridge of the Ardent, Rael Das was drawing on a paper chart with a red marker. The chart showed the Vokai supply network, 3 main lines feeding their front positions, with relay stations at 7 key junctions. The lines ran a long way back into Vokai space, long enough that cutting them had always seemed impossible. The Vokai knew this. Their strategic positioning assumed this. Rael had been reading again. He had a new book now, wedged beside the old one. This one was about ancient naval supply campaigns on Earth's oceans, back when ships used wind and wood. He had been thinking about what happened to an army that ran out of food before it ran out of soldiers. He drew 3 lines on the chart. Then he erased one and redrew it slightly differently. He looked at it for a long time. "Joe," he said. "Sir, give me a fleet call, all 7 captains." "When?" "Now." The plan he laid out to his captains was not elegant. It moved in 3 directions at once. One group hitting the first relay station hard enough to demand a Vokai response. A second group using the response as cover to slip through the gap and hit the second junction. And a third group hitting the third junction from outside Vokai tracking range using a cold drift approach. The same trick he had used at Kala Drift, but bigger, and coordinated across 3 separate units who could not communicate during the approach without giving themselves away. It required every captain to hit their target within 11 minutes of each other, blind. One of his captains, an older man named Vasquez, said, "Sir, this requires us to trust each other's timing with no confirmation and no fallback." "Yes," Rael said. "That's not in any tactical manual I've read." "I know," Rael looked at the chart. "That's why I'm using it." The Vokai tactical AI, when it analyzed the engagement afterward, flagged the attack as structurally unprecedented. It could not categorize it. It filed it under a heading that translated, roughly, as irrational success. It recommended this category be reviewed. No one reviewed it in time. The 3 relay stations went dark within 9 minutes of each other. The Vokai front line, cut from its supply network, began to slow. The council was watching. 3 small species, the Pelline, the Orathi, and the Atren, had been watching for some time. They had signed the Accord of Dissolution. They had watched humanity refuse it. They had then watched, quietly from behind their diplomatic neutrality, as a single species held back an empire. The Pelline sent logistical support first, medical supplies delivered through back channels with no official announcement. Then the Orathi opened 2 of their relay stations to human ships for refueling. Then the Atren did something that surprised everyone, including themselves. They sent 3 of their own ships, crewed and armed, with a message that said only, "We changed our minds." The council fractured, not loudly, quietly. Species that had signed began to have second conversations among themselves, away from the official record. HFY was present in 3 of those conversations and said nothing in any of them. She was listening. Then she went back to the council floor. She asked to speak. HFY had been a council observer for 19 years. She had never asked to speak from the floor. It was a Thalari tradition when a council member spoke formally, they spoke for their species. When they asked to speak from the floor, they spoke only for themselves. The room knew the difference. The room was very quiet. She stood. She was small. Thalari were always small. She had 4 eyes and the patience of something old, and she had spent the last several months on hospital ships watching humans treat each other's wounds. She said, "I have been a witness to this war. I was sent to record the end of the human species. I have watched them instead refuse to end." She paused. "I do not speak for Thalari, I speak for myself when I say I believe we voted too quickly. I believe we were afraid, and I believe we mistook their refusal for stubbornness." Another pause. "It is not stubbornness, it is something else. I do not have the word for it in my language. I have found it only in theirs." She sat down. The council did not vote. They did not need to. The shape of the room had changed. Vethar received a reply from High Command 3 days after sending his message. The reply was short. It said, "Elaborate." He wrote back for 2 hours. He wrote about Leningrad. He wrote about the Nuremberg trials. He wrote about a medic named Sira Ohan who had treated a Volkai soldier's wound without being asked to and without expecting anything. He wrote about the cafeteria conversations with Verk and the fact that she had answered every question he had, even the difficult ones, without anger. He wrote, "I am not suggesting we lost because they are stronger. I am suggesting we may be losing because they are right about something we have not named yet." He sent it. He did not know if it would matter, but he had stopped being able to not send it. That, too, was something the books had done to him. Outside, the stars were the same as they had always been. The war moved through them, slower now, differently, like something that had started as one shape and was becoming another. The armistice talks were held on a neutral station. Verk picked the room herself. It was not large. It had a long table, plain chairs, water and coffee on a side counter, and a window that looked out at open space. No flags, no formal banners, no recording devices by agreement of both sides. Vethar walked in on the Volkai side. He had been released from his rooms on the diplomatic station and given travel clearance. No escort, no conditions, Verk's order again. He sat across from her. Around him sat 2 other Volkai officers. Around her sat 2 human diplomats, and at the far end, HFY, attending not as a council observer but as herself, which was a distinction she had insisted on in writing before she came. "We will start," Verk said, "with what we both need this to be." The Volkai officer to Vethar's left, a hard-faced woman named Kethsal, said, "The Dominion needs this to end without humiliation." "Good," Verk said, "so do we." Kethsal looked at her carefully. She had been briefed to expect demands. She had been prepared for a list of terms that would strip the Dominion of resources, territory, and standing. That was what victory looked like. She knew of no other version. "What we need," Verk said, "is the outer colonies back, the occupied stations decommissioned and cleared, and a binding agreement that the Dominion will not push into council space again, with verification." Kethsal waited, and "That's it." A long silence. "You are not taking our territory," Vethar said. "It was not a question." "You can keep what you had before this started," Verk said. "We're not interested in the Dominion space. We're interested in ours." Vethar looked at his hands for a moment. He thought about the books. He thought about what it meant for a species that could have demanded more to deliberately not demand it. He did not say any of this out loud. He did not need to. The talks took 4 days. On the 3rd day, Kethsal asked a question that was not on any official agenda. She asked it late in the evening when the formal session had ended, and only she and Verk were left in the room, both of them tired, both of them with cold coffee. "Why didn't you take the surrender when we offered it?" Kethsal asked. "At the council, you could have saved billions, you could have survived." Verk was quiet for a moment. "As what?" she said. Kethsal thought about that for the rest of the night. She did not find an answer that satisfied her. Rail's commendation ceremony was held on a clear morning on a station that smelled of recycled air and something that was trying to be pine. He stood in a line with 9 other officers. An admiral he had met twice read their names and the engagements beside each name. When she got to Rail, she read Cal Adrift and Myra's Edge, and the 3-junction supply operation that had turned the front. He received a medal. He shook the admiral's hand. Then he gave a speech. It was 43 seconds long. He said, "I want to read some names," and he read them, all of them. Every name from the file he kept on the drive he never connected to the network. He read slowly. It took 38 seconds. Then he said, "That's all," and stepped back. No one clapped immediately. Then someone in the back started, and then the whole room did. Rail looked at his boots until it stopped. In the corridor afterward, Cho found him. She was holding 2 cups of coffee, and she handed him one without saying anything. They stood there for a while looking at nothing. "Good speech," she said finally. "It was their names," he said. "That's all it was." The Galactic Council met in full session for the first time since the Accord of Dissolution. The chamber was the same: dark stone, dim lights, curved seats. The paper from before was gone. Someone had removed it and no one had asked where it went. There was a new document on the table, a new charter. Humanity had written 3 of the foundational clauses. The first clause said that no species in council space could be made to surrender its legal standing as a people under any military or economic pressure. The second clause said that occupied civilian populations retained specific protections that could not be waived by any governing body, including their own. The third clause said that any species that had previously been conquered and absorbed under the old order could petition for reviewed status. The third clause was the one that caused the most silence when it was read. HFY read it twice. Then she looked at Verk, who was sitting at the human seat, in the same chair she had been sitting in when she had voted no and walked out. Verk was looking at the table, not reading anything, just looking at the wood grain of a table that was 3 centuries old. HFY thought, she wrote that clause for the ones the Voakai already took, not for us, for them. The charter was signed, all 11 species, and then, in a step that had no precedent in 400 years of council history, a 12th signature was added: Vethar, signing not for the Dominion, but as the Dominion's accredited diplomatic representative to the council. Something Verk had proposed, something that had taken 2 weeks of quiet argument to make legal. He signed his name very carefully. He had practiced the human-style signature 3 times the night before, alone in his rooms. The chamber did not erupt. It was not that kind of moment. It was quieter than that. The kind of moment that does not know yet what it is. That evening, Verk stayed behind in the chamber after everyone left. The cleaning staff worked around her. She sat at the human seat with a legal pad and a pen, and she wrote the after-action report, the real one, the classified version that would not be published. She wrote the names of the battles, the names of the dead, the cost in ships and stations and colony worlds that were going to take a decade to rebuild. She wrote about Myra's Edge and the 11,000 and the 3,000 in Private Marisol Yen and what that distinction had meant. She wrote about Vethar reading history in a room on a station and walking into a cafeteria with a question. She wrote about HFY standing on the council floor and speaking only for herself. She wrote for 2 hours. At the end, she put down the pen and looked at what she had written. The last line of the official report said, "At total cost of the above, humanity retained full sovereignty, restored council integrity, and established a new legal framework for occupied species." End of report. She looked at that line for a long time. Then she picked the pen back up and wrote one more line underneath it, in her own handwriting, not part of any official document, not for any record. It said, "Worth it." She capped the pen. She sat in the old chamber in the dim light for another few minutes. Outside the window, the stars were very bright and very far away and completely indifferent, the way they always were. She finished her coffee, then she went home,